We all make mistakes sometimes. The mistakes come in many different forms, and they have different consequences. Some of the mistakes people have made were actually so colossal they, in a way, eventually ended up changing the world. Winston Churchill once said that history is written by the victors, but as you'll see in this video, it's not always the case. I'm Mike with List 25, and from the sinking of the RMS Titanic to the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, here are 25 biggest screw-ups that completely changed history. Napoleon and Hitler's invasion of Russia in winter. Both Napoleon Bonaparte, in the summer of 1812, and Adolf Hitler, in the summer of 1941, tried to invade Russia, but the Russians held out longer than expected. The enemies ended up fighting in the notorious Russian winter. Neither Napoleon's nor Hitler's army were prepared for the extreme weather conditions and were eventually defeated by the Russians.
24.
Mao Zedong's order to kill sparrows. In 1958 in China, Mao Zedong, the founding father of the People's Republic of China, decided his country could do without pests like sparrows, so he ordered to kill all of these birds. 3 years later, as many as 45 million people starved to death as the elimination of sparrows led to overpopulation of insects, particularly locusts, that ate all the crops.
23.
Ronald Wayne selling his stake in Apple. Ronald Wayne was the third co-founder and 10% shareholder of Apple Computer. In April 1976, Wayne decided to sell his stake for a mere $800. Had he held on to it, that 10% stake would today be worth a staggering $63 billion.
22.
Grad student killing world's oldest tree. In 1964, Donnell Russ Curry, a grad student, got his tree core stuck in a Great Basin bristlecone pine. To remove the tool, a park ranger helped him to cut down the tree. Later on, Curry began to count the rings, eventually finding out that the tree was almost 5,000 years old. It was the oldest tree ever recorded.
21.
Leaning Tower of Pisa. It took 177 years to build the Tower of Pisa, but just 10 years after its completion in 1372, it started leaning due to soil subsidence. The lean degree was 5.5. But after the 2010 restoration, it's now just 3.99. The restorers are confident no more work will need doing to the tower for the next 2 centuries.
20.
Sinking of the RMS Titanic. The largest passenger liner in service at the time, the RMS Titanic was often described as unsinkable prior to its maiden voyage from Southampton to New York City in April 1912. Unfortunately, the Titanic proved to be sinkable after hitting an iceberg, resulting in the deaths of more than 1,500 out of the total 2,224 people on board. Many of them died just because there weren't enough lifeboats.
19.
Russia selling Alaska to the US. On October 18, 1867, the US purchased Alaska from Russia for 2 cents an acre, $7.2 million in gold, as the Russians thought it was nothing but useless tundra. Soon after that, in the 1880s and 1890s, massive gold mining began there, and it actually continues today. Alaska still produces more gold than any other US state except Nevada.
18.
Discovery of penicillin. Alexander Fleming, a Scottish biologist, pharmacologist, and botanist, did not really care much about hygiene while working. Oddly enough, it was because of his relaxed attitude towards a clean working environment that he actually ended up discovering penicillin, the world's first antibiotic, after a bacteria-killing fungus appeared on his dish.
17.
Boeing close to disaster after metric conversion error. In 1983, Air Canada's first ever Boeing 67 had to glide to a safe landing when it ran out of fuel. Someone did not convert the number of gallons of fuel it needed to liters. After both engines lost their power, the pilots made what is now thought to be the first successful emergency dead stick landing of a commercial jetliner.
16.
Lost hunters starting wildfire. A novice hunter, Sergio Martinez of West Covina, California, got lost in the woods near San Diego, so he decided to shoot off a flare. Unfortunately, the flare ignited what is now referred to as the largest wildfire in Californian history. Known as the Cedar Fire, the wildfire burned over 280,000 acres of land in San Diego County.
15.
Londoners killing cats. During the Great Plague of London in 1665, people suspected that cats were spreading the disease, so they started killing them. However, once the cat population started to fall, the plague got even worse, because there were no cats to kill the real plague carriers, the rats. The Great Plague eventually killed about 100,000 people, almost a quarter of London's population, in just 18 months.
14.
Archduke Franz Ferdinand's driver making a wrong turn. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria and his wife Sophie in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914, is considered the event that caused World War I. This tragedy could have been avoided had the Archduke's driver not made a wrong turn that took them into the path of the assassinator Gavrilo Princip. Princip, astonished at his unexpected opportunity, shot both the Archduke and his wife dead.
13.
Leaving the gate open in Constantinople. From the mid-5th century to the early 13th century, Constantinople was the largest and wealthiest city in Europe, as it survived many attacks and sieges from the Barbars, Arabs, Bulgarians, and Russians. In 1453, the city was besieged by the Turks, and someone accidentally left one of the gates open, allowing the Turks to get in. The inhabitants were massacred or enslaved, and Emperor Constantine XI was killed.
12.
Decca Records rejecting the Beatles. In February 1962, a relatively unknown music band, the Beatles, auditioned for the Decca Records company in London. They performed 15 songs, but didn't give a particularly good account of themselves, and the company rejected them. As we all know, the Beatles later became one of the most popular and successful bands of all time.
11.
Austrian army defeating themselves. In the 1788 Battle of Caransebeș, modern Romania, the Austrian army allegedly broke into two and ended up mistakenly fighting itself. The Turks, who the Austrians were supposed to fight, arrived on the site 2 days later to find 10,000 dead or wounded Austrian soldiers.
10.
Blockbuster passing on acquiring Netflix. In 2000, Reed Hastings approached former Blockbuster CEO John Antioco and asked for $50 million to give away the company he founded, Netflix. Antioco, thinking that it was a very small niche business, ended the negotiations and didn't buy Netflix, which at the time was only a DVD mailing service. Now Netflix, just short of being worth the same as CBS last year, soared past the television network owner with a $32.9 billion market valuation.
9.
NASA orbiter lost due to metric mishap. In 1999, NASA lost a $125 million Mars orbiter because a Lockheed Martin engineering team used English units of measurement, while the agency's team used the more conventional metric system for a key spacecraft operation.
8.
NASA deleting footage of moon landing. Speaking of NASA, there's another thing they're definitely not proud of. When they set out to look for their tapes of the iconic 1969 moon landing, they discovered that the tapes had been accidentally erased and reused to save money. To create a new official version of the moon landing video, NASA had to track down the footage from TV stations around the world and digitally restore it.
7.
Baker burning down London. Just 1 year after the Great Plague of London that ravaged the city in 1665, Britain's metropolis was hit by another disaster, as baker Thomas Fariner got distracted somehow and his bakery on Pudding Lane caught on fire. The fire soon spread to other parts of the city, eventually leading to the destruction of over 13,200 houses and 87 churches.
6.
Julius Caesar going to Senate. Caesar was warned by his wife not to go to Senate, but the Roman politician, famous for his arrogance, went there on March 15th, 44 BC anyway. Unfortunately for him, he ended up being stabbed to death by about 60 members of the Senate, including his best friend, Brutus. Et tu, Brute?
5.
Chernobyl disaster. On April 26, 1986, during a hurried late-night power failure stress test in which safety systems were deliberately turned off, a combination of inherent reactor design flaws, together with the reactor operators arranging the core in a manner contrary to the checklist for the stress test, resulted in what turned out to be the worst nuclear disaster in history.
4.
Cerro Grande fire. The devastating Cerro Grande fire in 2000 originally started as a controlled burn. However, it quickly grew out of control due to the dry weather and high winds. Over 400 families in the town of Los Alamos, New Mexico lost their homes due to the fire that eventually burned for 3 months.
3,
Soviet engineers burning gas pocket. After a drilling rig collapsed into a crater in Darvaza, central Turkmenistan in 1971, Soviet engineers decided to set the gases on fire, thinking it would burn out in a few weeks. Now, 46 years later, the crater is still burning. It actually became one of the most popular tourist attractions in the country.
2,
Columbus's voyage to America. In 1492, Columbus sailed the the Atlantic Ocean, and landed in Latin America, although he thought he just discovered another trade route to India. He and his men also accidentally transferred diseases, such as smallpox, to the natives, whose immune systems could not deal with the new diseases. Eventually, entire populations of the indigenous Americans were wiped out.
1,
Deepwater Horizon oil spill. On April 20th, 2010, a British Petroleum (BP) oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico burst, pushing nearly 5 million barrels of oil from the well. It was the largest oil spill in history, surpassing the 3.3 million barrels that spilled into the Bay of Campeche in Mexico in 1979. Affecting a total area of up to 68,000 square miles, the disaster had devastating effects on the marine life, killing millions of fish, turtles, sea mammals, birds, and other animals. So, what's a mistake you made in life that you wish you could take back? Let us know in the comments below.
Enjoying our lists? Be sure to click that subscribe button in the top right corner so you don't miss out on new ones every Monday through Friday. Share them with your friends and help us consistently conciliate curiosity. And if you want even more lists, check out these 2 videos here, or just head to our website at list25.com.